Hi guys, it's Makena. I'm from Ohio in the US. Woohoo! I'm currently here at the Cambridge DTS base in England, and I wanted to just share a testimony about some finance miracles in my life. One that specifically comes to mind is that of 2 summers ago. I was 19 years old, and around this time I needed a car because I got into a car crash and my car was totaled. If you don't know what that means the car was absolutely bad and you can't use it anymore because it was crashed so horribly. So we turned that in. I ended up having to go get a rental car. Well, with rental cars, you're only allowed to use them for about 2 weeks before you, the victim of the car crash, has to start paying out of pocket for the car after 2 weeks. So I was a victim of the crash. It wasn't my fault. So the last day came when I was using the rental car and I had to get a car that day. But unfortunately, I didn't have any support back at home, so I had to do this all by myself. Family support, to be specific. So I did this all by myself, and I ended up going to, guys, about like 12 dealerships in that one day. And I spent an hour at like all of them. And the last one I went to, I got there and I was so desperate, and as a 19-year-old girl, you're desperate, and men who work in the dealership industry see that and they like to use that to their advantage. So they ended up lying about my income. They gave me a 25% interest rate. In America, that the highest interest rate you really ever get is probably 5%. I got 25%. So instead of paying $15,000 for that car, I had to pay $30,000 for that car. But I didn't know this at the time. So as they brought out the papers for me to sign, I started signing them, but they were covering them. And still at this time, I'm 19 years old. I'm desperate, and I wasn't even focused on what they were hiding from me. I just was focused on getting a car. Yay. 3 weeks later, I'm at work. My boss and my coworkers are checking over my information. We just realized that I was totally screwed over. And so after that, my church hired an attorney for me, and we started this process of trying to figure out what to do with my car. And we explored a ton of options with other dealerships, seeing if we could trade in my car. Unfortunately, I would have to pay around $5,000 on my own to be able to send the car into anybody. And as a 19-year-old who works a minimum wage job, that just was not possible. So after a certain point, I think a couple weeks after that point, I ended up getting kicked out of my house, and I just lost, like, my family. I lost everything. And so I ended up moving in with a woman from church. She's an amazing anointed woman. And I remember there was one day after moving in with her that I woke up in the middle of the night and I walked out in the living room, and she was just up and she was praying and she was just being filled with the Spirit. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, what's happening? And she was like, you're worried, aren't you? You're worried about your car situation. I was like, who wouldn't be worried about a car situation when you have to pay $5,000? And you literally only have $1 in your bank account. And she was like, you know what? We're gonna pray right here, right now, that God would just have everything to do with providing your finances, and you would not have to pay one penny out of it. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, let's do that. So then we were praying, and she was just loosing the Spirit in the atmosphere and upon the situation. And guys, when I tell you, after that prayer was ended, she was going around the house just shouting and praising the Lord. And then about an hour later, I got a call from my young adult ministry pastor. His name is Justin. And I answered, and he was like, hey, Kenna, I couldn't help but to tell you this today. I wanted to wait, but I just need to tell you. And I was like, what's going on? And he was like, well, in the last 30 minutes, the church raised $5,000 for you for your car. And the thing is, guys, Justin and the woman's name is Sharon that I live with. So Sharon and Justin, they had not talked to each other. They did not communicate with each other about what was happening. Justin started raising money just spontaneously. Sharon got a word from God that I was worried, so she just wanted to pray for me. And somehow the Lord mended that together, and what the enemy meant for evil, our God used for good. And so I had a revelation, and that's my story, guys. It's an amazing story. So